Okay, this is lesson 6.5, Graphing Inequalities. Inequalities, if you remember, are less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Now, we already know how to graph equations. Equations are different than inequalities because equations have an equal sign. So, we're going to start by reviewing in the warm-ups how to graph equations. Because a lot of the rules are similar. There's just a couple of extra things you have to remember. So, the first thing I do, y equals mx plus b. Is it in y equals mx plus b format? Yes, it is. The y is isolated. Here, y equals mx plus b. Is number 2 in y equals mx plus b format? No, because the y is not isolated. So, when we get to 2, we'll put it in mx plus b format. Because this is in mx plus b format, the number by itself is your y-intercept. The number next to your x is your slope. We can go ahead and graph this. I graph the number by itself, the y-intercept first. I go to the y-axis. I put a dot at -2 because that's your y-intercept. Now, your slope is 3. However, slope needs to be fraction 3 over 1. Remember, slope is rise over run. The top number is up or down. The bottom number is right or left. Up for positive, right for positive, down for negative, left for negative. Okay, you might want to write that down again. So, here we go. 3 is positive, so we're going to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to go over 1 to the right because the 1 is positive. That's where we're going to put our next dot. Now, we have to have 3 dots, so I need to do that again. From the dot I just graphed, up 3. 1, 2, 3. Over 1, put another dot. Connect your dots. Make the line as straight as possible. Put arrows on your lines. That's how we graph. Number 2, I have to isolate the y. 9x minus 4y equals -8. I have to move the 9x to the other side, so I subtract 9x to both sides. Okay. 9x minus 9x is 0. That goes away on that side. And I have -4y equals, now I cannot combine -9x and 8 because they don't both have x's. So I'm going to write my -9x first, write your x first, minus 8. Now, in order to get rid of the -4, I divide everything by -4. That's supposed to be a y. It doesn't really look like a y, but it's supposed to be a y. -4 over -4 is a positive 1. 1y and y are the same thing. So I have y equals -9 over -4 is positive 9 over 4. My x, -8 divided by -4 is positive 2. So now, y equals 9 over 4x plus 2 is my slope-intercept form, because y is isolated, and I can graph that. Okay? You're going to graph it just like you did in number 1. You go ahead and graph it. If you have any questions, come in and ask. I will let you know this is going to go off the graph. It's okay. Just guesstimate at where it should be. Okay, now we're going to discuss graphing inequalities. Inequalities are less than, greater than, and we have to know something up front. That's right, R2. You're good. That's why I have you. R2 just said, as you heard him, if it's less than or greater than with no line underneath it, you're going to connect the dots with a dotted line. If it's less than or greater than with a line underneath it, which means or equal to, you're going to connect your dots with a solid line. Well, let's look at that. Here is our inequality. Y is greater than x plus 3. Now, let's look. Y, instead of the equal sign, I'm going to put is greater than mx plus b. Is this in mx plus b format? The answer is yes. What number is next to my x that's understood? Excellent. That's a 1. So my slope is the number next to the x. My y-intercept is the number that's by itself. So even though I have an inequality, it's still in mx plus b format. I can graph this. I graph by putting a dot at my y-intercept, which is plus 3. 1, 2, 3. And then I do my slope. My slope is 1. I'm going to make it a fraction, 1 over 1. Remember, the top number is up or down. Is it up or down? That's right. It's positive 1, so it's up. So I go up 1. It's positive 1 on bottom, so I go 1 right. And then I make my dot. And then I do that again. I know R2. I do it again. Up 1, over 1. R2 said, remember to go from dot to dot. Don't go back and go up and over from the original dot. You'll get the same thing. Now, I can, because this is slope of a line, I can go in both directions. If I went up and right, I can also go down 1 and over 1 to the left. Notice how these dots stay in line. Now, here is where we need to be careful. We cannot draw a solid line to connect these dots because there's no line underneath my inequality. So I have to draw a dotted line. I use a dotted line to connect my dots. And then I put arrows. The reason I'm using a dotted line is because there is no or equal to on my inequality. Now, we have one more thing to look at. If it is a greater than symbol, we shade above the line. If it is a less than symbol, we shade below the line. Why do we shade above or below? Here's why. This is a greater than symbol, so we're going to shade above the line. Okay. The line is the y value. The line is the y. In this case, it's the y. The monster always eats the bigger number. The monster's eating the y. That means our solution is above this line. Our x and y values lie above this line. Remember we were writing equations of lines and we would fill in a point? Well, our solutions to this lie above this line. So that's why we do that. Or we could say this. If, I'm going to call the inequality a monster, because remember in grade school they would put teeth on this, maybe call it the alligator, maybe call it the angry Pac-Man. I'm just going to call it a monster. So if the monster eats the number, or I'm sorry, eats the letter, if the monster eats the y, shade above. So if your monster eats the y, shade above. Okay, let's look at the second one. What is my y-intercept? Positive 3. 1, 2, 3. Put a dot there. My slope is negative 2 over 1. Negative 2 means I go down 2 over 1 to the right. Over 1 to the right because that's a positive 1. Again, I do it again. Down 2 over 1 to the right. Put my other dot. Now, when I connect these dots, am I going to use a solid line or a dotted line? Yeah, there's a line underneath this inequality, so I'm going to use a solid line. That's kind of easy to remember. Line underneath the inequality, draw a line. No line underneath, draw a dotted line. Now, all I need to do is shade. All I need to do now is shade. Well, if it's a less than sign, you shade below. This is a less than sign, so, oops, I don't want to shade with that. I want to use a highlighter. This is a less than sign, so I'm going to shade below my line. Don't worry about shading it all in. You can just do this. That's fine. Okay, so we could say if, you might want to write these things down, monster eats mx plus b, that's not a really good mx plus b, is it? Mx plus b shade below. Remember, this is your mx plus b right here. So if the monster eats the mx plus b, shade below. If it eats the y, shade above. Please write that down. If you need to pause the video, feel free. Okay, so now what about when the y is not isolated? Y is greater than mx plus b. Okay, so the y equals mx, y is greater than mx plus b. The y is not isolated. So we have to isolate the y. So I'm going to subtract 2x to both sides, just like my equation. This becomes 0. 3y is greater than negative 2x plus 6. Now I divide everything by 3. 3 over 3 becomes 1. So 1y and y, same thing. Y is greater than negative 2 over 3 plus 2. Now, what do we need to remember when we're solving inequalities? That's right. If you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the inequality. I divided by a positive, so I didn't have to do anything with my inequality. Okay? So that is how you isolate your y. Now we're going to graph, just like we did before. Plus 2, we put a dot of the y-intercept, plus 2. Now we're going to go down 2. 1, 2. Over 3, it's a positive 3, so we go to the right. 1, 2, 3. That's where I put my dot. Down 2. 1, 2. Over 3. That's where I put my dot. Now, here's where things, this is where kids go wrong with this. There's no line underneath my inequality, so that means I have to do a dotted line. Okay? Don't forget to put your arrows. And I have to shade. So you have to remember two things now. Is it dotted or solid line? And where do I shade? It's eating the y, so I shade above. Eats the y, shade above. Eats the mx plus b, shade below. Okay? Let's look at the next one. As we've discussed, this y only is a horizontal line. I only have the y value, horizontal line. So I go to negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put my dot. I draw my horizontal line. Now, what kind of line am I going to draw? That's right, a solid line, because there is a line underneath my inequality. Put my arrows. Now, I do need to shade. I still need to shade. It's eating the y. That means shade above. Eats the y, shade above. Okay? That easy. Okay, here is my x. What kind of line is x? That's right. Only have the x value. It's a vertical line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put a dot there. Now, I'm going to put a dotted line because there's no or equal to. So I put my dotted line, my dotted vertical line, and I need to still shade. Where am I going to shade? Above or below? Well, you're like, there's no y here. Well, okay, there's no y, but there is an x that's isolated. So if it's eating the isolated x, you would shade above. If it's eating the number, you're going to shade below. It's eating the number, I shade below. Okay? Go ahead and pause the video, do number 6, see if you get it right. Okay, let's see if you got it right. The first thing I have to do is isolate my y. That means I have to add 4x to both sides. 4 minus 4 is 0, so I get negative 3y is less than or equal to 4x plus 12. I cannot combine 4x and 12 because they don't both have x's. Now, here comes the tricky part. I divide everything by -3. The number next to your y is negative. That means you're going to flip your inequality. So my inequality is going to be flipped. -3 over -3 is a +1, so 1y and y are the same thing. It's no longer is less than or equal to, it's now is greater than or equal to, because I divided by a negative. 4 over 3x minus 4. 12 divided by -3 is -4. Okay? So now I graph this just like I graphed before. I go to -4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put my dot. Now, my top number is positive, so that means I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2. And I'm going to go over 3. Oops, what did I do wrong here? Did you see what I did wrong? Oh, yeah. Let's go back. I'm going to have -3y is less than or equal to 4x plus 12. I divided by a negative, didn't I? So this should be -3. That should be a -3 right there. I'm glad I caught that mistake. Please be careful, guys. Please be careful. -3 over 4, so that means now I went up 4. Which way do I have to go with my 3? It's negative, so I have to go left. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where I put my dot. Now, up 3, 1, 2, I'm sorry, up 4, 1, 2, 4, over 3 puts me off. I can't go down there, so I'm going to go off the graph a little bit. That's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, over 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to guesstimate and put my dot about right here. Okay. Now, it is a solid line that I connect them with. And I have to shade. Where do I shade? Well, it's eating the y, so I shade above. Okay? Okay, this is a long lesson, so it's a very important one too. Here, I would subtract 3 to both sides, number 7, and I would get x is less than -3. Now, I subtracted 3 so I don't flip my inequality. Only flip your inequality if you multiply or divide by a negative. You should be able to graph this one. Here, y is less than -3x plus 2. I subtracted 3x to both sides. I don't flip my inequality. See here, it looks like everything else you guys should be able to do. Just need to remember, if you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip your inequality. All right, if you have any questions, come in and see me. Thank you. Have a great day.